before we entered it, I'm like, how are we ever going to monetize this thing? How am I ever going to make a penny off of our podcast? Like, yeah, it'll get our name out there. We might have some notoriety or like, build our brand. But I don't think this is actually going to amount to anything. And boy, was I wrong.
Welcome into Impactful Conversations, stories and lessons for financial advisors. I'm your host, Dave Edgecombe. We've got an exciting one, and I have to full disclosure. So I've got Heidi Ricken Provost with me, one of our advisors, president of Ricken Financial.
Yep.
And so full disclosure, I was watching TV this past weekend, and Inception was on. And Inception, obviously, dreams within dreams.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be a podcast about a podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Because
major Inception.
Not only are you a financial advisor and president of your own firm, but successful podcast host.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, expanded your practice. It's probably leading to bigger and better things that we're going to get to. But I want to start you off with sort of what was how did the podcast come to be?
Well, great question. I think we're sitting in a studio of a company that I was at a marketing summit years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
And I said, have you guys ever thought about podcasting? And back then the market was not, because everyone was doing
night
radio.
Night and day difference.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone was doing radio and TV here, but podcasting wasn't on anyone's radar. And Alex House was like, we should look into that. Fast forward a few years and I get a phone call. Hey, we hired someone. We're ready to do podcasting. And since you brought it up years ago and you've kept asking about it, you and Jerry want to come. And so my dad and I decided, let's get rolling and let's help Impact start the podcast program. So we were, I think, one of the first podcast only media advisors here with Impact.
You've alluded to your dad, Jerry, who does
Yes.
the podcast with you. Kicking with the Rickens is the name of the podcast. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And I want to know, what's it like? Well, is a podcast easier to do because you're doing it with your dad and it has sort of a natural flow to it?
Yes and no, because we also have a co-host, and working with the three of us, sometimes it doesn't flow as easy.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say our biggest issue we had getting out of the gates was, how do we stop talking about fun stuff and merge business into this too and make it fun? Because the two of us are very similar and like to have a lot of fun and are very jovial and storytellers. And we found that we were maybe telling a little bit too much about ourselves and not enough about our business, if that makes sense.
It does, because I think it's a fine line that you kind of have to balance between doing a podcast for fun, and your buddies in your garage shooting the breeze and all that jazz. But when you're actually doing it as a business and trying to be intentional about it, and ultimately maybe it's not lead gen quite yet, but brand awareness or however you want to approach it, and treating it as something that needs to have more thought go into it. So how much thought goes into a podcast episode?
Well, I am probably going to get in trouble for being honest, but about 5 minutes before every time we shoot, the two of us sit down and say, what's our topic going to be today? Because we're always keeping a pulse on what's on the minds of our prospects and our clients. So throughout the week, we'll jot down, here's something a lot of people are asking about, or so many questions regarding this, or, what's an upcoming seminar we're doing and a topic we can use that we can then direct and send people to. So it's always kind of in the back of our minds. But we don't script it out. We don't sit there and prep for hours. Some people do, and more props to them. We're better off the cuff. So we just sit down and say, this is today's topic. And then, if it's something super complicated, because we talk a lot about taxation and that can get very in the weeds, very complicated, we'll figure out who's going to say what. Otherwise, we just kind of sit down and start talking with Doug.
Do you find yourself getting too far into the weeds and having to kind of pull yourself out?
Occasionally we do that to each other by literally just cutting each other off and saying, hey, we're going to stop here, start over and fly 30,000 feet above this topic instead of getting too far into the weeds. Because we have to do everything compliant too.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course. But I guess what I'm wondering is, does a podcast lend itself for you to get a little bit more into the weeds and a little bit more in depth? Is that a good thing?
Oh, absolutely. I think so, because when you do a seminar, you want to cover multiple topics and you only have an hour of time. If you have any time beyond that, people aren't going to be paying attention to you. So sometimes when we want to talk about something super complicated, like when it comes to taxation, we did like a 7 or 8 part series on ABCs of taxes and certain topics that we had to dive into detail about. And that would not, I mean, that would be like a 4 hour series if we made someone sit in a seminar and talk about it, even just hitting kind of the high level stuff. So it is an opportunity where we can really get into the weeds and share more data with people, because we want it to be educational and enough data that you want to come and see me, but not so much that you're overwhelmed by it, you know?
Or that there's no need for them to come in to see you.
Exactly. Got to put the little nugget out there, but you want to make them hungry so that they come and, visit you.
How do you make it not feel like an infomercial? I think that's what, I mean, full disclosure, I think that's what our biggest issue when we came up with a podcast was, how do we kind of throttle back at being just a PSA for our services here at Impact and what we do for you, and having it actually be insightful and informative?
That I think has just naturally, as we've naturally progressed and found our voices together, the only thing that feels infomercially to me is when we say the phone number 3 times during the podcast, and I'm like, people could just look at the show notes. It's a podcast. It's not like you're listening to me on the radio, you know? But outside of that, we really are just sharing a story, which leads so naturally into the call to action of, if this sounds like something you might need help with, give us a buzz, because this is what, we can do. We never share what we actually can do. It has to be compliant. But if this sounds like an issue you've faced and you need some help working through it, give us a buzz. And when you start to tell those stories and you find your voice as a storyteller and not a lecturer, it doesn't feel as infomercially, if that makes sense.
Or a salesperson, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
But, So how long did it take you to find your voice? We're not still looking for our voice, are we?
Oh, no.
I think you've got it. So that's why I'm curious to know what the first iteration of it was.
I think it took a couple months for us to really get to the point in time where that secret sauce was there and it felt magical. Our first 2 episodes we shot, we threw out, and I do not want to listen to them again.
That's okay. That's okay.
But yeah, it didn't take that long. I was more nervous to get started because I thought I was going to sound like a moron.
Really?
And oh yeah. And for a long time, I'm like, who wants to listen to this? And then I shot it and I'm like, oh, this is actually really nice. And I don't sound like an idiot. I'm just talking about different topics and it's really cool. My dad and I get to share this data with people and it might resonate with them and they want to talk about it. And then as our listenership has grown and we've heard feedback from people, it's amazing to me sometimes who's tuning in. Like his cousin's mother-in-law, who's in her late 90s, listens every week, and I'm like, how we're hitting all these people from even all over the world. We have cousins in Germany who are listening every week and they're like, I wish that applied to us here in Germany. But, if we're talking about U.S. taxes, obviously it doesn't apply to them.
Yeah.
But it's been a lot of fun just, I think also at the same point in time that we started out our podcast, I was moving more into an advisor role. And now I'm usually the main advisor people are seeing in our office, just the way that our operations are functioning. And it really helped find the confidence that I needed to get into that role too as well. But also simultaneously, Dad can share information that, he's been in this business a lot longer than me. So we kind of help each other out in the storytelling when it comes to our podcast too.
So like you looked into my show notes because that's kind of what I wanted to get to next was, and I hear this from the advisors that we work with that do radio, in that it's tough at first, but they find the immeasurable where people are coming to their seminars because they heard the radio show, but they're not a direct, they didn't come because of that necessarily. But the concept of getting more comfortable at your seminars because of your podcast, and in some cases because of your radio show. Have you found that the podcast has improved your presentations at your seminar?
100%.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because if you don't sit down and share the stories and the data and stuff like that, but you're just doing the one-off meetings with people, you're not as much of a storyteller and you kind of turn into the lecturer or, the educator that's very specific to each prospect or client that you're meeting with. when you have to generalize topics for a broader audience and you do it on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis, it makes you so much more in tune with what's happening in all of our prospects and clients' lives. And I now feel like I can just stand in front of my audience, if you will, at the seminars and have a conversation with them, because podcasting, our goal is we want to make people feel like they're sitting in the living room having a conversation with us when we're on the podcast. And I think utilizing that kind of feel in our seminars, we have over an 80% sticking rate for our appointments for everyone that's come to our seminars. And it's because we're using kind of the podcast feel and how we're approaching everything and talking to them. But we've also directed them to episodes that are relevant to whatever topic we're going to cover in those seminars before they're there too. So most people have already listened to our show, know who we are, and kind of know what to expect out of the evening too as well.
So you're alluding to that drip process and how you keep people engaged. Give me the nuts and bolts. I mean, how are you guys actually implementing that power or that podcast into your campaigns?
You know, they used to say you had to hear something or see something 7 times till it stuck. With the way that social media is present in our lives, that's over 20 times now. I think it's like 26 times. So we kind of bombard you with our podcast, but do so in a sly manner. So, you know, I walk around with this necklace on my neck that says
shameless plug,
Kickin' Rickin', you know, and my sister was like, that is a shameful plug if I've ever seen one. I'm like, you know what? Whatever it takes to get people talking. And we have our QR code that directs to the podcast link on our website, and we stick that everywhere. So in our email signature, not only is it a hyperlink to our podcast, we also have a QR code embedded in the email signature to make it look all cute too, because, you know, you hit people different ways. Every time you come to an event of ours, you get a notepad that has nothing but our logo and our QR code there on it. It's printed on flyers that we hand out in our little folders at all of our events. We embed episodes into emails for people. So if you do sign up for a seminar, we're going to embed episodes that are relevant to whatever topic you're going to that evening. And then after you attend a seminar, before you come to your first appointment, we have an episode that talks about what our appointment structure is like so that you feel more comfortable coming. And we embed that one and stick it to you there. It's all over our social media. We talk about it as much as we possibly can. And we just moved into a new office space where you actually have to walk past our podcast studio to enter our office building for our entire office building. And it is right there in your face. We want to make sure as many people as possible see it. You know, we have bookmarks. Everyone, you know, hands out books in this business. We have bookmarks with a QR code that'll lead you to it. Basically, everything we do, we're trying to market it to as well, because you can't just record a podcast. You actually have to use that information and you have to repurpose it multiple times so that someone actually listens to it.
That was an absolute marketing fire hose of details and things that you guys do.
And I'm sure I'm missing some stuff too, because we really do want to make sure everyone we meet is aware of the fact that we have it and that they could be learning more if they're listening to it.
Well, you included a lot there, and I want to parse through all of it, but a little bit of trial and error. Like, how did you guys ultimately get to that frequency and sort of that system that you have there?
I cannot take any of the credit for this.
What?
Yes, but a former employee of Impact who ran podcasting taught me exactly how to market it.
Okay.
And I was a good student. So we listened to everything Kim had to say.
Yep.
And I'm kind of the squeaky wheel. I'm not afraid of asking people's help or, you know, hey, what should I be doing? And I'll try anything, see if it sticks. So I've reached out to my marketing team at Impact a lot and said, is there any other idea you can come up with? And, you know, I missed a big one. When we took our podcast live, I asked Lauren, my marketing specialist, you know, my CMO in my practice, is there something I can do in taking this live to like really blast it out to a ton of people, not even knowing what I was asking? And we ended up doing a press release for our podcast, and we got picked up by over 500 publications.
What?
Yes. Including Morningstar, Yahoo Finance, MarketWatch. We literally, like, our podcast went viral when it was released because of that. It was insane. The first episode, we had like the highest viewership of any podcaster from Impact at that point in time because of that one idea. But how can we think outside the box just to market this thing as we get rolling?
So full disclosure, Heidi's here at Impact for Marketing Summit, our annual marketing event, and you are obviously, you said you're an advisor, but you are also very much in tune with the marketing element of it.
Oh yeah.
Does an advisor who maybe isn't as in tune, what kind of things should they be looking for, sort of that low-hanging fruit for a podcast?
You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It can be as simple as you have people's email addresses. If you've met with anyone ever, you have their email address, or you should. And let me look in that camera, or you should have their email address. So, if you have their data, use it. Once a week, or every 2 weeks, if you have a new episode go live, put a tiny little snippet out there. So here's what we do. The subject line says, "Are you kicking with the Rickens?" ? And all it says is, "Hey, this week on Kicking with the Rickens, you'll learn more about," and you just put the topic out there with a link to it and blow it off. It doesn't have to be some huge, you don't have to overthink some campaign on this. Just share the topic and put it out there. That's all it takes. And if you're going to do that and you're going to take a couple minutes of your time to blast it out on email, go to your Facebook page or your Instagram or whatever social media you utilize in your practice, LinkedIn, copy and paste and stick it out there, and it'll direct people right there. And our demographic doesn't need to see as many images and everything too. So sometimes you don't have to overthink it and come up with some creative video for them to look at or something like that. Just simply share what you're talking about. And the more you share, the more they'll see it and tune in.
Boy, this is a lot to take in. You're a fountain of marketing knowledge, so you're schooling me right now. I want to know from a drip campaign perspective, if you've got, I asked your dad before we got rolling, what kind of seminars you guys do, and he said you're big into taxes. So does that mean if someone's coming in for an estate planning seminar or something that's maybe not taxes, you're putting them in contact with a specific podcast that's about that?
Yes.
So how many different do you have sort of like segmented out that, okay, this is for this seminar and this is for this seminar? Is that how it's kind of broken out?
We don't necessarily have that, but I will tell you, when we're coming up with whatever topic is relevant in the market that we're trying, to grow our business in, we look through our archives and say, which episode can we then direct them to so that they at least get some knowledge before they come and see us at the seminar. So we kind of reverse engineer it that way. But we also, some weeks will be like, we didn't talk about this. Let's make an episode out of it so that it is more organic when we're sending it out for future seminars,
I think I do know. And this has been, Alex mentioned that you had a really good story for me. And I don't want to steal your words from you, but this sounded like this ended up being a very lucrative opportunity for you guys, I suppose. Yes. But it was through a CAE. Is this ringing any bells?
CAB, Client Advisory Board.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
Yep.
So give me the details about what you had going on. Because I do think, I don't want to say it's unorthodox, but
it is unorthodox. And I'll say, I know a lot of people are hesitant to start the podcasting program or to do any form of media because as an advisor myself, I understand when you have to cut the check for things, it's hard and you want to see what the ROI is on anything you do. And people are more attuned to want to pay for something, and they can get into the details of how podcasting works with impact and all of that. But I'm telling you, before we entered it, I'm like, how are we ever going to monetize this thing? How am I ever going to make a penny off of our podcast? Like, yeah, it'll get our name out there. We might have some notoriety or build our brand. But I don't think this is actually going to amount to anything. And boy, was I wrong. So 2 things. We talked about the drip campaign, and every week, if you have an episode go live, send an email out. Well, I had a women's only seminar in March of 24. And one of the women that attended said, I'd really like to meet with you, but I'm very busy right now. Just call me tomorrow. We all know those people you call. And if you're not like my office manager, you call a couple times and you give up. But my office manager called her every week for 8 months. And sometimes she'd answer the phone and say, I am so sorry. I'm in the ER right now. She was a traveling doctor. I'm in the ER right now. I can't talk. Click. Or she just wouldn't answer. 8 months later, she called in and said, hey, I'm ready to go. I want to be your client. I'm just going to bring everything to you today. Because she had listened every single week on her drive back and forth. So she got a nice database of who we are, what we do. And she knew, liked, and trusted us and was ready to do business with us, which is what the podcast can provide. So there was that one. And that is a one-off. She is now our single-handedly largest client. So it was very fruitful.
All from a podcast.
Yes. And then we have two different client advisory boards. We have one where it's women only. And then we have one where we're meeting with couples. And in one of the couple sessions, one of the wives is a helicopter mom, and she has adult children, but she can't let go. And she was telling me once a week, I text the kids, whatever your episode's about, because I didn't have the wherewithal to teach them anything financially. So I text them and I send it their way. And then we have a family discussion about it. And I make sure they know whatever the topic is, they're prepared. And I can answer questions about it. And I had no idea this was happening. But over time, all of a sudden, her kids start reaching out, and all of her children are our clients now. She shared that with other members of our client advisory board. And a bunch of our client advisory board kids are now reaching out because it's hitting a different demographic too, And I was afraid of podcasting because I didn't think that the 55 plus age range was listening, but the numbers showed they do. And it's cool that we're able to touch their kids too, and the grandkids. And, there's just a wider opportunity for business growth through, being able to share it with so many different types of people.
Well, in a podcast, the content itself is much more shareable.
Oh, absolutely.
So you're incorporating a new audience, which is great. One thing that you mentioned earlier was how you guys come up with your content ideas, and you kind of let frequently asked questions sort of dictate it. That what are we getting a lot? Oh, Shay, we should do a podcast on that. Have you been able to turn those podcasts into any other sort of marketing spokes that you are, maybe you're doing social media posts that are a little bit different than your podcast, but you're sort of taking that same ammunition and repurposing it?
We absolutely are. And through compilations of some of our podcasts, we realized we needed to redo all of our seminars too. And so our seminars are basically just like a long podcast too.
Really?
So we kind of repurpose the data everywhere. But I mean, like I said earlier, you have to share many, many times with people until they understand it nowadays. So we use that in pretty much every marketing arm we use in our practice.
Kicking with the Rickens is the name of the podcast. You can get it wherever you get your podcast. If you forget it, you can zoom in on her necklace. It says Kickin' Ricken. The post show, I'll show you my impactful conversations tattoo that I have on my arm. No, just kidding, Mom. I don't have a tattoo. Thank you so much for sitting down with us and sharing this insight, and hopefully talking to maybe a gun-shy advisor who doesn't see the value of a podcast into, there's some true value in there, and there's some real opportunity if you get in before the market is truly oversaturated, because it's filling up.
Absolutely.
So thank you once again. This has been Impactful Conversations. If you're looking for more resources to grow your practice, our YouTube channel is a fantastic place to start. House Rules, Selling with Stories. And we've also got some great testimonials from advisors, much like Heidi, that have grown their practice tremendously through some of the resources that we provide here at Impact. Hopefully this wasn't a what did I say? What were we trying to... How do you make it not feel like an election? An infomercial. Hopefully this hasn't felt like an infomercial and that you picked up something, and we'll see you next time.